Welcome to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. I'm your host, LaMont Leavitt. In a world overflowing with noise, confusion, and distraction, we're here to cut through the clutter and explore bold, unique paths to a longer, healthier, and more vibrant life. Through candid conversations with business leaders, wellness experts, industry pioneers, and innovators, we'll uncover insights to help you discover your own personalized, unique approach to thriving. Tune in, trust the compass of wisdom within, and find your fountain of vitality. Hello, I'm LaMont Leavitt of the Fountain of Vitality podcast. We're grateful today to have entrepreneur, founder, and CEO, Charles Gaudet. He's a great guy and has learned a lot about how to make your products predictable. In fact, in his book, we'll talk about that a little bit as far as how it actually works and how he's made companies actually worth more than they were otherwise. And we're going to learn from his marketing methods and learn how we can be not like just any other solution out there. Take it away. Glad to have you on board.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. It's great to be here in front of your audience.
Tell me a little bit about your story how you started out as a kid, even at the age of 4. I love that, to hear more about that and how you got to where you are today.
So a lot of people think that entrepreneurs are born, right? But the reality is that, so Tony Robbins, I invested $250,000 several years ago traveling the world with Tony Robbins. And one of the things that he likes to say is people make decisions for one of two reasons, either desperation or inspiration. And for me, this was a little bit more of desperation. See, my father was an entrepreneur. He worked every waking hour of every day and get up in the morning and he'd already been at work. I go to bed at night and he hadn't come home yet. And so I never got a chance to really see my dad. But when I did see my dad, he would say, hey, Charlie, if you ever want to make something of yourself, then you've got to be a business owner. And so at 4 years old, I wanted to get my dad's attention and I decided I was going to start my own business. And so I started selling artwork to my neighbors and I'd sell it for 50 cents a piece. And I'd go to my neighbors and they would go ahead and they would buy this artwork. And so that worked out really well. And that's how I started my first business. But there are so many lessons that came from that it still brought me to where I am today. And one of those lessons came from a woman named Mrs. Hersey. And she was the last sale that I made that day. And I went to her and I pulled my artwork out of the trash bag that I had all my artwork in for whatever crazy reason. And I went and I handed it to her. And she looked at me and she said, "Is this your best work?" Now, at that point, I was producing by volume because it was like, I just need to make as many pieces of paper as I possibly can because I'm going to my neighbors and everybody's going ahead and they're paying me anyway. So it's just by volume. And I gave it to her and she said, "Is this your best work?" And I could feel the blood rushing to my face. I could actually feel my heartbeat in my face. It was the first time that happened, which is why I still remember this right now in this moment, because I was completely embarrassed. And I told her it wasn't my best work. And then she said, "So then how do you expect me to pay you 50 cents for this or buy it at all if it's not your best work?" And I was like, I don't know. She's the first person that actually gave me an objection. Everybody else is like, "Here's 50 cents, go and have fun."
Away. Yeah.
She gave me an objection. And she said, "This is only worth just like 3 or 4 pennies." So she gave me like 3 cents. And that was the last sale I made and the last time I ever put out scribbles. Because I realized that I never wanted to have that experience again. That if I was going to do something, I was going to put something out that was my best work. And so as far as me getting started, on one hand, it was about, number one, getting my dad's attention. But number two, I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, that I always put forth my best effort so that nobody would ever look me in the eyes again and be like, "Was this really your best?" And it really was a foundational core moment for me that helped take me to the different companies that I've run and operated in the past to where I am today.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Tell me that was at 4. So kind of tell me your transition into your teenage and then your young adult years, some of your pathway that led you to where you're at as well.
So I've always had a business. I've never had a traditional quote unquote real job. So all through grammar school, I would start something, even if it was a little tutoring business to the other kids in class, landscaping, all like little things. I washed boats, I painted cabinets. If anybody was willing to give me money, more or less, I would go ahead and I would do the hard work to get it done. My first quote unquote real business, if you want to call it that, was while I was in while I was in college. I started a consulting company. While I had that consulting company, because I studied at Babson, #1 school in entrepreneurship and whatnot, and I felt like I knew a thing or two. And there were small businesses that were paying me to help them operate better, because most businesses are built on hard work, word of mouth, and referrals. So I was able to support them. But throughout this process, we found an opportunity that was provided by my father-in-law. He said, man, pet health insurance. I'm surprised that nobody has pet health insurance. They spend so much money on their dogs and whatnot. Why don't they do this? I thought it was such a great idea that I ran with it. And we created one of the first pet health insurance companies in the country. And the result of that was we got the attention of media from all around the world. Ernst & Young named us as one of the greatest seed stage companies. Venture One selected us as such. We gave all these presentations, raised a little bit of money. Everything was going really well. The day that our venture capitalist was supposed to give us the largest sum of money, earlier that morning, I negotiated a bigger office space. I had all this stuff all set up. Negotiated other deals with technology companies. He showed up in person. I had my team sitting around the boardroom table. And he said, I think you saw what happened in the market today. And it was the .com bubble. And I was like, I go, yeah. And he says, well, that tanked my ability to give you money. And I wanted to just tell you in person that I can't do this. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I woke up that morning thinking that my life was made. It created all of these opportunities, only to then immediately that afternoon, I had to scramble to get out of all of the contracts. It just so happens that my rent was due like the following day. So I had to manage to get out of our lease, move myself out that same day, and then start from scratch. So at that point, I did what every normal 20-something-year-old kid would do. I said, I need to go to Disney World to clear my head. So I took off to Disney with my then girlfriend, now wife. And I'm like, what is it? I need to do something. And I knew that I was unemployable, just the nature of who I am. What can I do? And I'm a big fan of saying, everybody has to play the best hand with the cards that they've been dealt. Everybody's been dealt a hand in their life. The thing is that most people don't actually look at the aces in their hand or the kings or the queens or whatnot. They look beyond their hand to see what everybody else is doing and what they should be doing and societal pressures and everything. But I looked at things differently. I go, what is the hand that I've been dealt? And one of the things that I recognize is my dad was a hard money lender. In other words, he loans money to people who were in real estate.
Yeah.
And so I said, I can leverage this as an opportunity. So I went to my folks' house, and my dad was about to have a meeting with a gentleman who was going to purchase a piece of land and needed my father for capital. So I said to my dad, can I go and listen into the negotiation? He said, no problem. I went, I listened to the negotiation. And when we got back in the car, I said, if somebody else made you that deal, would you take it? And he said, the first one to the table with money and a commitment wins. And I said, done, I'm in. And he goes, wait, what? And I said, I'm in. I want to do this. And he actually got really upset with me. And he got upset with me because he said, I don't want you in the real estate business, particularly in real estate development. He says, you You don't know what you're talking about. You've never done real estate development before. This is way too much money. I've always envisioned you to do something else and, something this and that. And so, and he didn't want to do business with family. And I was so persistent that he realized that by him saying no was going to cause more damage to the relationship than him saying yes.
Then yeah.
So he committed, and the way that we had to do things is I had to get the money from the lawyer. I had to sign all the agreements from the lawyer, and that he subordinated his role as my dad to the lawyer. If I didn't pay, then the lawyer was allowed to foreclose, and that's just the way that it worked, so that my dad was a neutral party. I ended up paying double-digit interest rates on this money. I bought a tract of land, and I built roads and neighborhoods. But this is just the way that I operate, and that I've never done a real estate development before, ever. And now all of a sudden I'm in, way over $1 million in debt, paying double-digit interest rates, and I've got to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And so, I went to Barnes and Nobles first to pick up a book on what it is to do real estate development, right? But then I went around and I started talking to anybody that I knew who was a real estate developer, asking them questions, what they should do. I went to their development. I took names of all the trucks, the people who I knew had good reputations, who their subcontractors were. I met with the building inspector and asked the building inspector what he found were the best practices and all that other jazz. So then I knew the best practices. I knew what people were doing. And I went ahead and I built a real estate development company. And so we ended up selling the first property really quickly, went in, did a second development that was more than twice as large as that first development, and ended up building the most profitable real estate development company within that niche that my big Boston accounting firm had seen. And he was so shocked by how we did it that he showed up, principal of this big firm, showed up at my house completely unannounced. When I opened the door, he let himself in, went to the breakfast niche, sat there and said, "What are you doing?" I go, I don't understand. What are we getting at here? What are you doing? I said, what? He goes, you've paid for your properties. You've got fair market value what you paid for it, fair market value what you've sold it for, but you've got the highest profitability out of anybody in the industry. And he specialized in real estate developers. And I don't understand. What are you doing, and is it legal? The thing is I didn't know that what I was doing was special. I had zero idea. All I knew was that I wanted to make money and pay off this debt and everything else. But when I looked around and I'm like, wait a minute, all these people, they're paying for other things. You build a house for somebody and they need furniture. They need patio furniture. They need TVs. They need home theaters. They want alarms. They want upgraded landscaping. They want a driveway seal coat. And I just turned around and anything that anybody would touch, I went to all of these companies and I'm like, look, I've got clients that are going to need, for example, furniture. I've got clients that are going to need furniture. And I would love to introduce you to my clients. But the only way that I'm willing to do that is if you're willing to give them a price or a benefit or an offer that is better than
good.
Anything that they can get off the street.
Yeah.
And they go, okay. And then I said, and I want a small percentage of the deal, that anything they buy. So that became the foundation of a strategy that we teach our clients called the triple win benefit, meaning that you work with somebody, they give a benefit that is unavailable to the public. You get a benefit when they end up, forming a transaction, they get a benefit because of the client. And so I was getting thousands of dollars every week, and I had everything. I negotiated deals. I don't know if you remember Tweeter from way back when. It was almost like Circuit City. Again, I'm dating myself
That's
here.
way back. Yeah, that's way back.
I negotiated a deal with Tweeter. They had never done anything like this, ever. And so they had to take it all the way up to the top to get permission. But I was making money from people who were getting these flat screen plasma TVs were the big thing then, right? But plasma TVs and home theaters. And not only that, I turned around and I built myself a home in this neighborhood, and I sold them on this idea of, imagine how cool it would be if the builder's home was also used as the demo. So you put something so cool in my house that everybody else in the neighborhood is going to want it because it's in the builder's house.
Right.
And they're like,
Right.
that would be pretty cool. And I go, we can do that if you sell it to me at cost. And say they put a $50,000 home theater right in my living room. We did a lot more than that. We did whole house speakers in every room, the bathrooms, the master bedroom, the hallways, outdoors, indoors, you name it. It was like Tweeter's ultimate showroom.
Awesome.
At a substantial discount. But I did all of that to get this huge, and then, I ended up making more money. When that was done, I turned around and I said, well, I think I'm done with the real estate development gig now. I'm done. I'm going to do something else. This time, I think I need to do something maybe a little on my own. I decided I was going to take the money that I made and that I was going to build a proprietary stock trading company. I'd never traded stocks before. But I was going to go ahead and I was going to build a proprietary stock trading company. I studied patterns in the markets. I started doing well, started attracting the attention of some people that hired me to help them, coach them on what they needed to do to grow their business. I mean, I'm down in South Africa and I'm teaching some really wealthy people on what they need to do to trade, invest their portfolio, and so forth. And then one time I ended up bringing a bunch of people over to my house so that I could teach them what I was doing. And I was teaching them what I was doing. I noticed that they all, because now I'm spending more time there at my house, I've noticed that they're having different results, all of them. Then I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. You can't build a trading company on variation. Variation would be the enemy of quality, as Deming would say, or what I like to say, the enemy of excellence. And so I'm like, we need to be able to minimize that variation. And so I turned around. Now, I'm not a coder either, but I learned code so that I could build algorithms to ensure that I knew that every trade was precise down to the penny, both on the entry and on the exit. And then as I built these algorithms, it allowed me to run other systems that was able to back test the systems through years of data, millions of data points, so I could not only understand how to trade my stuff, but I could prove that it actually worked over time. And we did that, did actually really well. At one point, we had $100 million committed to us. We were building a hedge fund out in the BVI. Things were going really, really well. The banks were so impressed with the work that we were doing that in addition to the millions that I was trading, they gave us additional leverage on top of everything that we were doing. And I mean, life was pretty good. I had a hedge fund that paid me to teach them how to improve their results, right? Just a few years ago, I'd never traded a single stock, and yet I'm getting paid by a hedge fund to teach them how to do their thing. And then the dot-com crash happened. And I ended up losing everything all the way down to almost nothing. Like when I say I would have owed the bank millions, I walked out of my office because I didn't want to see my accounts implode. I walked to see my wife. At this point, I had a little boy. And I said, hey, just want to let you know, we've lost all our money. We're going to have to move in with our parents. I'm going to owe the banks millions. Probably going to have to file for bankruptcy. I'm sorry. I gave it my best. I don't know what to do. I was so beyond stress that I was in calmness. Then later on that afternoon, I went back in my office just to shut the computer down. And I looked at it and I go, what happened? it didn't explode. Like I didn't lose my account, didn't implode. It came close, but then it reversed its way. I managed to trade my way back to pay the bank all the millions of dollars that I owed them, and then put enough in my account to build a buffer. And at that point, I said, I can't do this again. I'm gonna close it down, because all my algorithms accounted for normal market fluctuations, but 2008 was not a normal market fluctuation.
It was a crazy time.
Yeah, not a normal market fluctuation, and so that's what happened. And so then I did that, and once I was done, somebody at some point I started getting into marketing. Somebody offered to pay me to help generate leads. I started generating leads from them. I started doing pretty good, so much so that they said, we're going to have to start paying you every week because you're making so much money. Like, it doesn't make sense to pay you every month anymore. We need to break this up into chunks. So we're going to start paying you every week. And then somebody eventually back in 2010 was like, can we just pay you to help you or pay you to grow our business? And I was like, yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
and then I started Predictable Profits. And one of the things that I loved about Predictable Profits is that, it's a different opportunity every single day. And I get to work with, companies as small as, maybe they're doing six figures, all the way up to, I work with some of the most successful, billionaires on the planet. And if people ask me, my son actually asked me this question, like, what keeps me up at night? But the interesting thing is, what keeps me up at night is the same thing that I love most about my work. Like, my biggest challenge is also my biggest reward. And that when I get to work with such smart people, you know what the challenge is? The challenge is when they spend 1 hour with me, that hour has to be the most valuable use of their time. And if it's not the most valuable use of your time, then they want to move on.
Right.
There's seldom the money. And so for me, it's how do I make sure? I work with some really, really smart people, some of the smartest people on the planet, most just happen to be, 7-8 figure CEOs. But it's how do I show up every day and give them something that shows them this was the most valuable use of your time that you could have spent all day, all week on the business. And so that's what keeps me up. And it's also what has me love what I do, because I love that challenge.
That's awesome.
That brings me to where I am today. And, again, 2010, I'd never done coaching or anything like that before. And then here we are today. International Business Times did a feature story on me, called me the go-to business coach for 7- and 8-figure companies. Yahoo Finance called me the CEO whisperer. I think it was 2 weeks ago. MSN did a feature story, and they called me the go-to business coach for 8- and 9-figure CEOs. So it's like, for me, I have to laugh at this. DM News named me the #1 sales and marketing thought leader in 2025. I mean, Miami Wire, they said that I was the #1 CEO out of the entire state of Florida to follow. So it's like all of this stuff I look at and I'm like, if they only knew just a few years ago, like,
right.
I felt like I didn't even know what the heck I was doing. Somebody was just like, hey, can I pay you to do this? But my whole life followed this pattern of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And part of that benefit was not knowing what I was doing, because it forced me to think so much differently as opposed to learning about it in a book. Because then I would have just gotten results like everybody else got. The results that we did were so different because it just forced me to let's figure this out.
Right. One question I have for you is, I get asked this a lot. Whereas you got a company, you're going along, it seems to be working well, but things shift in the economy, like what happened to you, or you have a challenge because you don't know what to do. How do you recognize when it's time to pivot a little bit and not keep pushing it forward? And how do you know when you got to just keep pushing it forward? It just takes blood, sweat, and tears.
There's several different responses that I could give to you based on context, right? What I will tell you is there's a gentleman, Marshall Thurber. Marshall Thurber was he's the only person ever mentor under Buckminster Fuller and Dr. W. Edwards Deming. He was also Tony Robbins' mentor way back in the day, and a number of other people. He was my mentor and also one of my business partners way back when. Marshall said to me, the most valuable trait out of any entrepreneur is their ability to adapt and evolve. And so that's part of what brought us close. Why he flew me over to his home in Mexico and whatnot is because he noticed that I've been able to adapt and evolve with all these different situations and move quick. So your question about how do you know to adapt and evolve is really great, because that is for an entrepreneur CEO, like, you need to be able to do that. 2020 is what really tested so many people on that ability to adapt and evolve. That was an inflection point. Throughout our lives, we've had, throughout my life, and presumably you and I have similar inflection points, right? We've had 2020 was an inflection point. We had 2008 was an inflection point. The dot-com crash was an inflection point. 9/11 was an inflection point. 1987 was an inflection point. Right. And so those are major inflection points. When you have these inflection points, you're forced with three decisions. So if you're a business owner, and we're going to experience this again, we have three questions that we have to ask ourselves. The first one is, do I need to change the market to meet the message? So is the message stays the same, but do I need to change? Do I need to change the market? So perfect example of this was a few years ago, tech had a crash. There were a lot of companies. I work with a lot of agencies, PR agencies, and so forth. A lot of them happen to work with tech companies, a lot of software and this and that. And so they're like, well, what's going on? How do we pivot? I said, let's ask a different question. Like, if we're going to look at, like, what is a market? What message still resonates with this market? We noticed that fintech, insurtech, AI, like, that message still resonated. So we just pivoted a little bit to meet with that market, and the companies took off massively. It's just being able to say, okay, this is receptive to these people. Let's pivot. So that's question number one. Do you change the market to meet the message? Change the market to match the message. Question number two is, do you change the message to meet the market? Right? So in the middle of 2020, I worked with a travel company. They were hit. One of the hardest hit industries in the entire world was travel, right? I mean, I worked with restaurants. I worked with a whole bunch of these people during that. And when this happened, this guy calls me up. His hair is all disheveled. He was on FaceTime. And he said, I just need your blessing to close down my company. What are you talking about? Why are we closing the company? And he says, well, I mean, I only get paid when people get on a plane. Planes are grounded right now. I've got offices all around the world. I can't even visit my offices. Our biggest competitors doing $200 million a year plus, they've already closed down their offices. I built this business ever since I was 19 years old. But at this point, it's so hard for me to do this. I just need you. I trust you. We've worked so long together. Just tell me to close it down. I'll close it down. I said, this will be one of the best times in the world for you to be in business. I don't understand. I don't think you understand. Then the travel industry, and he went on and tried to educate me on the travel industry. I'm like, dude, right. I get it. I'm like, this will be one of the best times in the world for you to be in business. So he said, well, what? I go, you need to just change your message to meet your market. Let me ask you a question. Are your emails still being opened? Yes. Are they still clicking on your emails? Yes. You think they'd want to buy if they could? Yes. So why don't we just change the message and we'll say, look, the whole world is shut down. So what we're going to do is when the world opens up, everybody's going to be rushing to get on these planes. So why don't we do this? We'll be able to pass some of the savings and some of the other stuff to you right now while it's available. Let's lock you in. We give you extra time to plan that dream trip of yours. And as soon as the borders open up, we'll go ahead. And when you're already locked in, we can make that happen for you. Once we did that, keep in mind, his competitors going out of business. He broke every daily, weekly, and monthly sales record, eventually being the best year he's ever had, ever in his business. He became the number one most successful company within his niche in the world. And today I still believe he holds that title.
He changed the message to match the market.
Changed the message to meet the market. And then the final one, and this is like the last resort, this is where you have to change both the message and the market, right? And so that's when just the message doesn't resonate, the market doesn't resonate, you almost have to reinvent your company. In most cases, you can either do one of the first two, but you don't have to do the last two. I mean, I think, I've been quoted on the NASDAQ as saying that I love a bad economy. I write about it in my book, The Predictable Profits Playbook, talking about that I love a bad economy. I'm often looked at, people think I have two heads when I say that. But the reality is, LaMont, when you look at those people in bad economies, quote unquote bad economies, they do everything they teach you in business school. They lay off their employees, they reduce their marketing expense, they go in the quarter, they suck their thumbs, and they're told just weather things out, like stay low, things will pass, just let things happen. But then when you look at some of the greatest companies in the world, got their big break during, down economies. And that's because they leaned in. Buyers are still buyers, so just a little bit more discerning, a little more careful with how they spend their money. But buyers are buyers. When you lean in, you play smart moves, you pivot where you can, you're actually able to get more market share easier, and you're able to grow your company. It's less noise. People think that there's a good economy and a bad economy, and they label it as such, but there's actually no such thing as a good economy or a bad economy. They're only different economies, but different economies require different strategies. You can't operate under the same strategy in a quote unquote bad economy as you do with a good economy. Those strategies have to change. They're totally different strategies.
Right. But
people use a good economy strategy in a bad economy environment, and then they wonder why things don't work anymore.
So tell me this, on a company that's doing a pivot, and there's a different strategy for that pivot, whether you're an entrepreneur, 1 or 2 employees, maybe a mid-sized 20 to 50 employees, and then a big company. How do you get everyone on board with the pivot and the change? Because people fear change. They're worried about their job. They're worried about, is the company going to succeed? They see all the reasons how it could fail. What are the different ways you've seen CEOs get their ranks excited about pivoting and stepping off into that unknown?
So I'll give you the short and condensed version, because this is a much longer conversation.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one of the easiest ways. And this is actually one of the benefits of working with some such smart people, is you get to see what works and what doesn't work in other environments. And a gentleman named Chris Chopra, he's the CEO of NP Hub. He shared this with me, and I thought it was really brilliant. He used to go to his team with changes and say, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. And the team would push back, right? It was really frustrating. He changed his approach. Instead, he would go to the team and he'd be like, LaMont, here's what I think we should do. Tell me every reason why this won't work. So he automatically gave them the invitation to tell them
poke
why
holes in it.
And so they turn around and they poke holes in it. And this is why I don't think it works. And then he would go back and he would look at that conversation and analyze the data, respond to the objection, and then bring it back to them and either say, okay, so I've listened to you, I've done this, give one more look. Why won't this work? Or he made a strong enough position that he's like, look, I took your response, here's this. Now, what do we need to do to put this into play? So when people hate change, oftentimes what they really hate is the fact that they didn't have any input and their ability to affect that change. But when you enroll people in and welcome their feedback into making the change, now they tend to be a little bit more interested. Now, I said this is part of a longer conversation because, everyone does have a certain unconscious motivators, and there's a whole big discussion on human behavior and how to communicate that with the different people and so forth. So on a bigger cultural level, there's a deeper one, but integrating and having feedback is a big thing.
Well, one of the pushbacks I learned in my past was if I brought a situation to my committee of decision makers, they would poke holes into all the reasons why we shouldn't do something, and it kind of they fed on each other's negativity. Then we didn't do a project, which in hindsight would have been a fantastic project to tackle. But that there was kind of a groundswell of community. We don't see how that would work. There's all these reasons why it wouldn't work, and then we walked away from the opportunity because we went down this negative path. So managing community expectations and getting the right people on board that are positive forward thinkers is an interesting challenge in a business.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is surround yourself with what we call yeah buts. Somebody who's
Yeah,
going to always have a yeah but, yeah but, yeah but. Like, we don't want that. But if I went to them and I'm like, Lamont, I'd like to roll this out, and we're going to do this, and if they come back and they push against it, you're going to get triggered. They're going to be upset, and so forth. But it really does happen to how we're going to communicate that change when we welcome that negative feedback. And even when I present you with an opportunity and I say, why won't this work? The most important thing for me to do is not to be defensive. So I have to listen, explain, tell me a little bit more about that.
right.
Okay, so how would we solve for that? And like really make them think about it, not just problems, but then start making them think about the solutions. Okay, so, that's interesting. So Lamont, let me ask you a question. So then if we actually did that and then solve for it this way, what do you think the impact would be on the company if we did that? I mean, if we did exactly, what do you think the impact would be? And I'm like, I mean, I didn't think about that. It would probably be huge. I don't know. Like, hold on. Give me some context. When you say huge, like what are you talking about? I don't know. It could be like 10 million over the next couple of years. Oh, whoa. 10 million. Really? Yeah. No, $10 million. Oh my, that's just one thing. And now they start getting excited, right? And it's the vision that's starting to be created, right? So they start getting excited. They start seeing the vision. And through that, like buy-in really starts to happen.
I get what's exciting to me is if you message to your employees, we're going to go in this general direction. We're going to make mistakes along the way, and it's okay. It's a process. Software is a process. It's never done, but we know the direction we need to go. And then you just change how you're rowing a little bit
Yeah.
to keep going on the right direction based on what your customers are telling you, giving you the feedback. Yeah, you were close, except make these few changes here. So don't be afraid to just step off into that abyss, knowing you got a good team around you to keep. The one example my partner keeps using is sometimes we got to go in a direction and we're fixing the wings on the plane while it's in the air. That's kind of how you have to figure out what the customers need.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So anyway, well, tell me about your predictable profits, some of your key P's on your methodologies and how you've helped it, what you've done is different than every other market. There are so many different marketing methodologies out there that they say they're the cat's meow on how it actually happens, but there are so many similarities. What makes your offering unique and truly different?
Well, if we just look at like the fundamental engine that fuels the growth, the reason why we've been able to create, month after month growth is, as you've heard from earlier in our conversation, there's always been like this pattern of me trying to figure things out, right? Studying what works, figure things out, studying what works. And so I created the predictable profits, or, I created predictable profits operating system. It feels weird because this is a team. Like the team always had influence in how things were created, right? But we created the predictable profits operating system, and it's broken up of 3 major components: setup, sales, and scale. And each one of them needs to be in place in order to create predictable, sustainable growth month after month, year after year. If you're missing any one of those components, then you're going to stall, you're going to plateau, you're going to get these cycles of feast and famine. But if we just take one of them, setup, for example, just because you talked about marketing. I spoke to the CEO of a $500 million company who was like, yeah, no, we do marketing. And I just said, You can't do marketing. And he looked at me and he goes, well, what do you mean? You can't do marketing. That's like me saying I do doctoring. Like, I can't do doctor just as much as you can't do marketing. And he says, well, so explain yourself. So marketing is a function. See, it's a function of how you create, capture, and nurture demand. Marketing is a function. And so let's look at the function of marketing and let's see how effective your marketing is. So how effective are you in creating demand? And he said, I don't know. I'm not even sure how to measure that. And I said, okay, how effective are you in capturing that demand? Oh, I know, thousands of emails a day, a week, blah, blah. Okay, so you got that. What about nurturing demand? I mean, how effective are you in your ability to nurture that demand? He goes, I don't know. And I said, so 2/3 of your entire marketing function is operating in the dark. And you're wondering why you're not growing fast enough. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think about it. So, the operating system, the predictable profits operating system, looks at business differently. It looks at all the different items and functions. There's a reason why I don't sit there and offer people a whole bunch of techniques and tactics, because it's not that. This is a system that has to work. It's a flywheel that has to turn, that has to happen in order to create sustainable growth. Fast growth and sustainable growth strategies are two different things. Fast growth companies, the Kauffman Foundation did a study and found that 66% of the fastest growing companies within 5 to 8 years of getting listed on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list will shrink in size, go out of business, or be disadvantageously sold. And that's because fast growth strategies are totally different than sustainable growth strategies. But you could still take the sustainable growth strategies that we're talking about and still those companies can grow fast. I helped grow a company from 950,000 to 66 million within 7 years, I think it was. So it's like, you could still do it, but it's a different strategy. But then, why we get results that are so much different than everybody else is a combination of, number one, it's the operating system. Number two, if you look at the way that most coaching companies operate, you turn around and you hire a single guru and you expect the guru to know everything.
Right.
Well, we change that. We bring together some of the smartest people in the world, whether you're doing 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, you name it. We bring them together. They all have a particular zone of genius. So we're bringing a collective genius together. And then the people that are providing the advice, the coaching, this is what they do every single day. You have an operations question, you talk to the person who's doing operations every day. Sales every day. Outbound marketing every day. Other areas of marketing, talk to that person every day. So it's like, you're not hiring a single guru. You're working with people that have
a team,
yeah. People, genius, like you're a collective intelligence that is able to drive strategy. Nothing that we've ever taught is anything that we've never done ourselves. Because we have the data, we know it works, we've tweaked it, and we can share, this is what's working right now. And, that's the reason why, that's why our results are that much different than what you're going to get anywhere else. And it's the operating system, and it's the approach for how we help our clients implement and get that stuff done.
Oh, that's great. Hey, it's been awesome having you on today. If people want to get a hold of you, this is the book you put together, Predictable Profits. Where else could they go to track you down, Charlie?
Yeah, predictableprofits.com would be the best place. Again, that is predictableprofits.com. They can also listen to me, should they choose, if they want to, on the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So the Beyond Seven Figures podcast, then there's the predictableprofits.com. And you can also grab my book. You could get that also on predictableprofits.com. It's free plus shipping, so take advantage of that. Or you can go to Amazon and pay whatever, $18 for it. Either way.
Right. Great. Hey,
awesome.
Thanks for your time today. It was awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We'll talk again soon.
Sounds great.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. Head to fountainofvitality.com for more episodes, insights, and resources. Remember, Your health is yours to own. Take charge, focus on what you can control, and keep exploring what works for you. Always be your best self, lift others, and trust the compass of wisdom. Until next time, stay vibrant and take care.